Superintendent Smith, can you please talk us through your recommendation?
Yes, I will. And I was debating whether or not to do a PowerPoint where I'm really walking you through very specific elements of this, or whether I'm just going to talk to you. And I'm electing to just talk to you. You've got two documents that actually have this laid out. And as you know, we've been engaged in a process where we had community involved in helping us design what the process would be. Listening sessions that have been cluster-wide as well as individual school-specific. I think in any given listening session, you could come away with a feeling of, okay, there was consensus that this group is really believing K-8s are what they want to reinforce in this cluster for X number of reasons. You'd go to another meeting and you'd end up with a sense of middle school is the right direction for these reasons. I myself have really entertained the full spectrum of what's the right move to make in this cluster. The theme that ran through everybody's conversation was the instability over decades, essentially in the Jefferson Cluster being the overarching theme, and how do we bring stability to this cluster. The recommendation you have in front of you basically responds to things we heard during the listening session, and requests to step back, take a look at some of our systemic policies, one being our enrollment and transfer policy that was developed in a very different time period to address really different concerns that the district had. And then since that time had No Child Left Behind laid on top of it, and had a particularly devastating effect on the Jefferson Cluster, and has not been reviewed in light of our new equity policy. And so I am recommending one of the things that we do is step back and do a look at our enrollment and transfer policy, and specifically to ask the Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Enrollment and Transfer to be the ones that take a deep look at that policy and be part of recommending changes to us. Secondly, and you've heard this theme throughout, is for us to look at our boundary changes district-wide, and we're 3 years into an enrollment balancing process that we basically have done cluster by cluster, with the idea that we are creating enrollment stability to positively impact teaching and learning and how we staff our buildings, and that we have enough students to really offer strong programs in every one of our schools. But it has been cluster by cluster, and in every one of those we've hit up against a moment where you start to consider the contiguous boundaries of the next cluster, but you've not done a process with the families in the contiguous areas. What it's led us to is really understanding, back up, take a moment where we do it for the district as a whole, because we may come up with very different solutions than we do when we're looking within a contained, currently defined cluster. So second recommendation, step back and do the district-wide look at boundaries. And then what that does is do a different set of what would be the recommendations, the actions we take within the Jefferson Cluster at this moment in time, which are in the areas where we have the most acute under-enrollment that need some kind of an action in order to stabilize. So the two specific actions that I am looking at recommending to you, one is we've got K-8s throughout the cluster. Chief Joseph is our only K-5. It's now facing over-enrollment issues. We have Ockley Green that has a K-5 magnet, and 6-8 that is both magnet students, and Chief Joseph, 6th through 8th graders. My recommendation to you is to do a single K-8 in the that combines the Chief Joseph and Ockley Green communities, and I am leaving that as the recommendation that I'm putting in front of you right now, with discussions still in front of us that engage those two communities in the specifics, specifically grade configuration of what remains on the Chief Joe campus, what goes to the Ockley Green campus in the near term, but with the idea that they would over time be merging onto the single Ockley Green campus. I'm also leaving open to involving the community in the decision about leadership, decision about naming of the school, but the concept is, again, that we would have a single strong K-8. The recommendation does not displace any of the current transfer students into Chief Joseph, so it leaves us able to serve all the students who are currently being served at Chief Joseph. It also closes the magnet portion, the K-5 magnet portion of Ockley Green, but does not displace students who are currently enrolled in the magnet. So they would have a choice of either continuing to attend the new neighborhood K-8, opting to transfer to King's Arts program, or return to their neighborhood school. So all three of those choices would be open for those students. And I purposefully am saying, we're allowing the circumstance for that neighborhood catchment area to create its own K-8, and leaving open the room for what does that look like as we transition to a single building, but would imply that we then are committing to something that remains stable over time. So not that it stays undefined, just that I want the voices of that community to be part of defining it. So that's the first one. The second one is we have King that has a small neighborhood catchment area. So even if every student in that neighborhood catchment attended King, it remains small, and given that we're recommending stepping back and doing the district-wide boundary change, I wouldn't recommend doing temporary boundary changes. What we do have is the opportunity to co-locate, and I would probably define a 3 to 5 year period of co-location that allows two small programs to grow. So the King neighborhood program and the Access program, which is currently co-located on the Sabin campus. And it's essentially one that I would be looking to those two communities to identify what's the opportunity of co-location that allows them both to grow in this time period. The other features of this are really looking to the requests we heard from every single school community about please support us figuring out how we strengthen our neighborhood school, put a priority on neighborhood school. Numbers of our schools have identified what are core academic themes that drive them. We have an immersion program, we have an arts program, we have IB programs. We have a school that's identified they would like to have an environmental focus as a way of strengthening them. We have a 3 to PhD program in partnership with Concordia, and Concordia has said they indicated their willingness to expand their partnership to other schools in the cluster. So I think the other area I would be calling out as part of this is how do we as a district partner with each of those schools to strengthen their core academic program and really focus on understanding both why families are transferring out of the cluster and how do we draw families back in and really say how do we strengthen these neighborhood schools. We've got a really a strong desire for strong neighborhood schools in this cluster, and so I think this is about stability and helping to build them. You've also got called out in the report or the proposal identified costs for doing this transition. The moving the staff at King, Access, Ockley Green, and Chief Joseph, approximately $400,000, which we're looking at our construction excise tax revenues as a way to cover that. We anticipate reviewing technology and nutrition services supports within the schools and potential upgrades, looking at about $200,000. Transportation costs appear to be neutral. And the two larger processes that I've identified, so looking at district-wide boundary processes, I'm anticipating that would be us working with an external firm who actually does those kind of analytics about district mapping, and so I would anticipate a cost that I don't know what that would be at this point, and probably also a cost associated with supporting the work that engagement that our student advisory committee on enrollment and transfer would require to do their work. So that is the essence of the proposal. It's really about reinforcing stability and stepping back and looking at this with a district-wide frame and not taking more wholesale change actions until we've done the district-wide frame. The thing this does not preclude is the eventual creation of a middle school in this cluster. but it's something that we would need to actually be drawing in the actual capture rate of the cluster in order to have the demand to sustain an additional offering in the cluster. So that door is not closed. It's just leaning into the configuration we currently have and working to strengthen it as opposed to doing a wholesale change at this moment in time. That's it.
Clarifying questions?
I have.
I can walk you through what.
mentioned special ed.
So in terms of special ed,
Maintaining special ed at Woodlawn.
at Woodlawn,
Yeah.
which it maintains the programs that are, currently in
So
place at
there's
Woodlawn.
More stability.
It does more stability. It's
it's
stability
important
for
to
the
point it
communities.
out.
I'm going to say, like, this is the biggest thing we heard from people was the cry for stability in the program and the relationships that are currently exist within their current programs being a really strong factor in student achievement. And so please lean in, maintain those relationships. I'd say the other thing that is an overlay in all of this is the kind of budget scenario we're looking at, which we, again, at the current moment with the governor's budget, it's a $17 million hole. I anticipate a lot of work going on in this legislative session that will hopefully not be that large of a gap by the time we're actually building our budget. But it's not going to be a big infusion of resource beyond what we already have that helps, that makes the experience feel different in our schools. So. Can I just do one more on process? So at this point, it's now out of my court as the listener and over to you. But just for people to know that February 9th, from 10 a.m. to noon, there's a public hearing at Jefferson High School. And you need to sign up in advance to testify. February 11th at 6 p.m., there's public testimony at the board meeting that will be here at BESC. And then February 25th at 6 p.m., the school board is scheduled to vote on the recommendation. And written feedback can be directed either to myself at carolesmith@pps.net or the school board or the school board at schoolboard, all one word, at pps.net. So, and I'll say that we've had a tremendous amount of public input that has been considered and wrestled with, and really, I think you hear a lot of that reflected in the proposal that I just put in front of you tonight. But we're still in process, so the feedback the board gets matters.